I built an empire on cold blood and absolute control. Nothing ever shook me. Until tonight. I walked into a crowded restaurant and saw her. Mia, my quiet, untouched executive assistant, wasn't at her desk. She was laughing, blushing, and reaching to hold another man's hand. In that single fraction of a second, the disciplined Mafia Don died, and a ruthless monster took his place. I completely lost my mind. I didn't just ruin her date. I willingly tore down my entire dark world to claim her. Who is she to me? My absolute ruin. And my only beautiful salvation. If you like such kind of story, please like and subscribe. Let's dive into the story now. Dante Russo did not tolerate chaos. As the undisputed head of the Russo syndicate, his life was a meticulously calculated chessboard where every piece moved according to his whim. His empire was built on iron discipline, absolute silence, and a cold, unyielding detachment from the softer aspects of human existence. Love was a liability. Affection was a weakness exploited by enemies. But every empire had its hidden vulnerability. For Dante, it was the quiet, fiercely efficient woman who sat just outside his double-doored office at Russo Enterprises. Mia Vance had been his executive assistant for 2 years. To the outside world, she was the consummate professional, organized, unflappable, and entirely immune to Dante's terrifying reputation. She handled his chaotic schedule, translated his curt commands into corporate directives, and anticipated his needs before he even fully formed them. She was his shadow, his anchor in the light, and the only person in the world allowed to see him without his armor. What Dante had never admitted to himself, what he had buried under layers of denial and ruthless focus, was that Mia had become far more than an assistant. Her presence was the oxygen in his suffocating world. The scent of her vanilla perfume was the only thing that could calm the storm in his blood after a brutal meeting with rival families. The sound of her voice typing out notes or answering calls was the melody that kept his inner demons at bay. He thought he had everything under control. He believed he could keep her in this perfect, safe orbit indefinitely, close enough to cherish, yet far enough to protect her from the blood on his hands. Until a rainy Tuesday afternoon shattered the illusion completely. Dante. Her voice drifted across the heavy mahogany desk. Dante looked up from his ledger, his dark eyes instantly locking onto her. She was wearing a tailored navy dress, her dark curls pinned up neatly, though a few rebellious strands framed her face. There was a faint flush on her cheeks that he hadn't noticed before. "Yes, Mia." His voice was a low, gravelly baritone. "I was wondering if it would be all right if I left at 5 o'clock sharp tonight," she said, her fingers lightly tapping against her tablet. "All the briefs for the Milan merger are filed, and the evening logs are updated. I have an engagement." Dante's pen froze. An engagement. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. In 2 years, Mia had never asked to leave early. She was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. She practically lived for the job, just as he did. "An engagement?" Dante repeated, his tone conversational, though a sudden, violent spark ignited in his chest. "A family matter?" Mia looked down, a soft, uncharacteristic smile playing at the corner of her lips. "No. Actually, it's a date. A first date." The world seemed to lose its sound. For a fraction of a second, Dante's heart stopped beating, replaced by a cold, suffocating weight. A date. With a man. A man who would touch her hand, look into her eyes, and try to claim what Dante had secretly considered his own since the moment she walked into his life. "I see," Dante managed to say, his face transforming into a flawless mask of corporate indifference. Not a single muscle twitched. "Of course, Mia. You've earned the evening off. Enjoy yourself." "Thank you, Dante." "See you tomorrow," she said, her smile widening before she turned and walked out of the office. The moment the heavy doors clicked shut, Dante stood up so fast his leather chair slammed into the wall behind him. The air in the room felt localized, burning hot and razor-thin. His fists clenched until his knuckles turned stark white, the tattoos tracing down his forearms tightening against his muscles. A date. The word echoed in his mind like a war drum. He paced the length of his office, his breathing shallow. He tried to tell himself to let it go. She was a civilian. She deserved a normal life, a normal man who didn't carry a beretta beneath his custom-tailored suit. She deserved someone who could take her to the movies without looking for exits, someone who didn't have a bounty on his head. But logic was powerless against the sudden, monstrous wave of jealousy that tore through his veins. The thought of another man looking at her the way he secretly looked at her, the thought of another man making her laugh, made him physically sick. It made him want to burn the city to the ground. Dante pulled out his phone. He dialed a number he knew by heart. "Sir?" The voice of Marco, his head of security, answered on the first ring. "Find out where Mia Vance is going tonight," Dante commanded, his voice dripping with a lethal, quiet intensity. "Find out the restaurant, the time, and the name of the man she is meeting. Now." "On it, boss." Dante hung up, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the neon-lit skyline. He had crossed a line, he knew it. He was breaking his own golden rule of detachment. But as the dark, storm-filled night rolled over the city, Dante realized he didn't care about the rules anymore. He was losing his mind, and he was entirely powerless to stop it. The restaurant was L'Amore Dorado, an opulent, high-end establishment tucked away in the city's historic district. It was a place of soft purple and crimson lighting, shimmering crystal chandeliers, and intimate, velvet-lined booths designed for lovers. It was a place Dante owned through 3 different shell companies, though Mia had no idea. Dante stood in the shadows of the restaurant's split-level architectural divider, half hidden by a dark marble pillar. He was dressed in a sleek, all-black tailored suit, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the faint edge of a scar on his collarbone. His dark hair was brushed back, his sharp jawline set in a rigid, unforgiving line. He looked exactly like what he was, a predator stalking his prey. His eyes were locked onto a booth across the room. Mia looked breathtaking. She had let her dark, voluminous hair fall in soft, cascading curls around her shoulders. She wore a rich, deep crimson dress that exposed her collarbones and the soft curve of her shoulders. She was glowing under the warm light of the small table lamp, a glass of red wine catching the reflection of the chandeliers above. And sitting across from her was him. Marco's report had been thorough. The man's name was Julian Vance, no relation, a junior partner at a prestigious corporate law firm. Clean record. Good family. Boring. Right now, Julian was leaning forward, flashing a practiced, charming smile, talking animatedly. Mia was listening, her lips curved into a beautiful, genuine smile. She laughed at something he said, a sound Dante could not hear through the ambient noise of the restaurant, but he could see the way her shoulders shook, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners. A violent, primal rage roared to life inside Dante's chest. He gripped the edge of the marble partition. His fingers dug into the stone with enough force to crack bone. His gaze darkened, his brow furrowing into a terrifying scowl. He felt an overwhelming urge to walk over to that table, rip Julian out of his seat, and throw him through the front window. "She belongs at my side," the dark voice in his head whispered, savage and relentless. "Not with him. Never with him." He watched as Julian reached across the table. His hand hovered in the air, slowly moving toward Mia's. He was going to touch her. He was going to lay his hands on Dante's untouchable anchor. Dante's composure completely snapped. The tight grip he maintained on his mafia empire, the discipline that made him a legendary don, it all evaporated into thin air. He lost his mind. Before Julian's fingers could make contact with Mia's skin, Dante stepped out from behind the pillar. His stride was long, purposeful, and radiating pure, unadulterated danger. The ambient chatter of the nearby tables died down instinctively as he passed, patrons sensing the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere, the arrival of a man who commanded life and death. Mia was mid-sentence when a shadow fell over their table. "Good evening, Mia," Dante said, his voice a smooth, lethal purr that cut through the romantic music of the restaurant like a knife. Mia froze. Her head snapped up, her brown eyes widening in sheer, utter shock. The color drained from her face, replaced quickly by a flush of absolute bewilderment. "Dante, what are you doing here?" Julian blinked, looking up at the imposing, dark figure towering over their intimate table. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "We're in the middle of dinner." Dante didn't even grant Julian the courtesy of a glance. His eyes remained fixed entirely on Mia, burning into her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "Your evening off has been revoked, Mia," Dante said softly, leaning down slightly, placing one hand on the edge of the table, effectively trapping her within his space. "An urgent matter has arisen regarding the Milan account. We need to leave. Now." "The Milan account?" Mia stammered, her professional instincts warring with her utter confusion. "But everything was finalized. I checked it twice." "I found a discrepancy," Dante lied smoothly, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "One that requires your immediate, undivided attention. In my office." Julian stood up, trying to assert himself, though he was a full head shorter than Dante and half as broad. "Look, buddy, I don't care who you are or what kind of business you run. You can't just bust in here and dictate what she does on her personal time. She's off the clock." Dante slowly turned his head. For the first time, he looked at Julian. It was a look that had made hardened killers drop to their knees and beg for mercy. The temperature at the table seemed to drop below freezing. "I am Dante Russo," Dante said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of a death sentence. "And I suggest you sit back down, close your mouth, and forget you ever met this woman. Because if you speak to her, look at her, or even think about her again after tonight, I will ensure your firm is the least of your worries. Am I making myself clear, Julian?" Julian's face went entirely pale. The bravado vanished in an instant. He knew the name Russo. Everyone in the city knew the name Russo. His lips trembled, and he slowly sank back into his velvet seat, completely paralyzed by fear. Dante turned back to Mia, extending his hand. "Mia, let's go." Mia stared at his hand, then up at his furious, possessive face. She was angry. He could see the sparks of defiance in her eyes, but she also saw the raw, unchecked desperation beneath his terrifying exterior. She looked at Julian, who was staring at his plate, refusing to meet her eyes, and then back at Dante. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The moment her soft palm met his calloused skin, a jolt of pure electricity surged through Dante's body. He gripped her hand tightly, pulling her out of the booth, and led her out of the restaurant, leaving a terrified lawyer and a shattered date in his wake. The ride back to Dante's private penthouse suite was dead silent. The atmosphere inside the armored Maybach was suffocatingly tense. Dante stared out the window, his jaw clenched, his mind a chaotic blur of rage and possessiveness. Mia sat on the opposite side of the leather seat, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her breathing rapid. She didn't say a word until the private elevator dinged, opening directly into Dante's sprawling, minimalist penthouse. The walls were dark glass, offering a panoramic view of the rain-slicked city. The moment the elevator doors closed behind them, Mia spun around. "Are you completely insane?" she yelled, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. The professional reserved assistant was completely gone. In her place was a woman pushed to her absolute limit. "What was that, Dante? You humiliated me. You terrified Julian. You dragged me out of a restaurant like a piece of property. There is no discrepancy with the Milan account, is there?" Dante threw his suit jacket onto a nearby leather chair. He turned to face her, his eyes wild, his composure entirely unraveling. "No. There is no discrepancy." "Then why?" Mia cried out, tears of frustration and anger welling in her eyes. "Why would you do this to me? I have given you 2 years of my life. I have worked late, I have kept your secrets, I have protected your schedule. I finally try to have one normal night, one normal date with a normal guy, and you ruin it. Why do you care so much?" "Because I am losing my mind, Mia," Dante roared, taking a massive step toward her, his voice breaking with a raw, bleeding emotion she had never heard from him before. Mia flinched slightly, but she didn't step back. She stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. Dante stopped just inches from her. He was trembling, the great, terrifying Mafia Don brought to his knees by a single woman. "You want to know why I care? You want to know why I ruined your date? Because the thought of another man touching you makes me want to tear this city apart piece by piece. Because seeing you smile at him felt like a bullet to my chest. Because I love you, Mia. I have loved you for 2 agonizing years. The silence that followed his confession was deafening. The only sound was the heavy rain slashing against the glass windows. Mia's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened, staring at him in utter disbelief. You love me? Yes. Damn it, yes. Dante ran a frustrated hand through his hair, pacing around her like a caged animal. I tried to hide it. I tried to keep my distance. Look at me, Mia. Look at what I am. My hands are stained with blood. My world is dark, violent, and full of monsters. I thought if I kept you as my assistant, I could keep you close enough to protect you, but far enough to keep you safe from the darkness of my life. I thought I was being strong. But tonight, when I saw you with him, when I saw you looking at a normal life, I realized I am a selfish bastard. I cannot let you go. I cannot watch you belong to someone else. He stopped pacing and looked at her, his eyes raw with a devastating vulnerability. I am sorry I ruined your date. I am sorry I am a monster. But you are my anchor, Mia. Without you, I am entirely lost in the dark. Mia felt a tear escape her eye, tracing down her cheek. The anger that had consumed her moments ago evaporated, replaced by a profound, overwhelming wave of emotion. For 2 years, she had harbored a secret, hopeless crush on her dangerous, beautiful boss. She had forced herself to look for a normal guy like Julian because she thought Dante saw her as nothing more than a tool, an efficient machine to manage his life. She thought her love for him was a one-way street that would eventually destroy her. "You idiot," she whispered, her voice trembling. Dante blinked, confused. "Mia." She closed the distance between them, stepping directly into his space. She reached up, her soft hands cupping his rigid, stubble-roughened jawline. "You absolute idiot. Why do you think I've stayed for 2 years? Do you think I care about corporate logistics? Do you think I stay up until 3 a.m. managing your life because of a paycheck?" Dante's breath hitched, his hands instinctively coming up to rest on her waist. "Mia, what are you saying?" "I don't want a normal life, Dante," she said, looking directly into his dark eyes, her gaze fierce and unwavering. "I don't want a safe, boring lawyer who doesn't understand the fire in my soul. I want you. I have always wanted you. I took that date tonight because I was trying to run away from how desperately I love you, because I thought you would never look at me as anything more than your assistant." Dante stared at her, his heart violently slamming against his ribs. The realization washed over him like a tidal wave, sweeping away 2 years of denial, fear, and restraint. "Mia," he groaned, a sound of pure, unadulterated devotion. He leaned down and captured her lips in a kiss that had been brewing for 2 long years. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, passionate collision of 2 souls finally breaking free from their chains. He pulled her flush against his body, his large hands anchoring her to him as if she were the only real thing left in the universe. Mia wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, pouring all her hidden longing, her fears, and her absolute love into the embrace. The tension, the jealousy, the shadows of the restaurant, it all burned away in the heat of their shared confession. In the center of his dark empire, Dante had finally found his queen. The euphoria of their confession was tragically short-lived. Just as Dante pulled back to rest his forehead against Mia's, a sudden sharp sound shattered the romance of the penthouse. Thwack. A neat, round hole appeared in the reinforced glass window just inches from where Dante's head had been a second ago. A spiderweb of cracks rippled across the dark pane. Sniper fire. Dante's mafia instincts reasserted themselves in less than a heartbeat. The vulnerable lover vanished, replaced instantly by the lethal, calculating Dawn. "Get down!" Dante roared, grabbing Mia by the waist and tackling her to the hardwood floor just as a second bullet shattered the adjacent window, sending a shower of crystal shards raining down over the room. The penthouse was plunged into darkness as Dante reached over and slammed the master kill switch on the wall panel, cutting all the lights. The city skyline outside provided the only illumination, casting eerie, shifting shadows across the floor. "Dante, what's happening?" Mia gasped, her heart pounding in her ears, though she remarkably kept her head, curling tightly into his side. "The Moretti family," Dante growled, his voice laced with a terrifying, icy rage. He reached behind his back, drawing the sleek, black Beretta from his concealed holster. "They've been looking for a weakness. They must have followed me to the restaurant and then here. They think they can catch me off guard." He looked down at Mia in the dim, shadowed light. Her crimson dress was dusty from the floor, her hair wild, but her eyes were steady. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't panicking. She was looking at him with absolute trust. "Are you hurt?" Dante asked, his hands rapidly scanning her body for any signs of blood. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice remarkably steady. "Just tell me what to do. Stay low. Crawl behind the kitchen island. It's reinforced steel and marble. Do not move, no matter what you hear. Marco and my men will be here in less than 2 minutes. The security alarms have already alerted them." "Dante, be careful," she pleaded, gripping his forearm. He leaned down, pressing a hard, fierce kiss to her lips. "I am going to end this. Nobody threatens what is mine." Mia crawled quickly and efficiently toward the safety of the kitchen island, just as the heavy oak doors of the penthouse were blown off their hinges with a deafening blast. 3 heavily armed men in tactical gear breached the threshold, the red laser sights of their submachine guns cutting through the darkness, searching for life. "Russo!" one of the gunmen called out, his voice echoing maliciously. "The Moretti family sends their regards. Your empire ends tonight." Dante didn't reply with words. He replied with lead. From his position behind a structural pillar, Dante popped out, his eyes adjusting perfectly to the dim light. Bang! Bang! 2 shots fired with terrifying, surgical precision. The first 2 gunmen dropped instantly, bullets piercing their center mass before they could even register his location. The third gunman panicked, letting out a wild spray of bullets that tore through the leather furniture and shattered the remaining glass fixtures. Dante Dove rolled across the floor, dodging the line of fire, his movements fluid and predatory. He came up on one knee, his gun raised, locking onto the final attacker. Bang! The third man collapsed, his weapon clattering across the floor. Silence returned to the penthouse, heavy and thick with the scent of ozone and gunpowder. Dante stood up slowly, his gun still raised, scanning the hallway. A second later, the elevator doors burst open, and Marco rushed in with a dozen fully armed Russo soldiers, their expressions frantic. "Boss, are you all right?" Marco yelled, taking in the scene of the 3 downed assassins. "Secure the perimeter," Dante ordered, his voice cold enough to freeze water. "The Moretti family has breached my sanctuary. I want every single one of their operations in the Northern District burned to the ground by dawn. Locate Don Moretti. Tell him I am coming for him personally." "Right away, boss." Marco turned, barking orders to the soldiers, who immediately began moving out to execute the command. Dante lowered his gun, his composure completely resetting the moment his eyes searched the room and found Mia. She was slowly stepping out from behind the kitchen island, her eyes wide as she looked at the carnage, but as her gaze locked onto Dante, the fear vanished. Dante dropped his weapon onto the counter and sprinted to her, throwing his arms around her, pulling her into his chest with a desperate, crushing force. "You're safe. You're safe," he murmured into her hair, his heart hammering violently. For the first time in his life, Dante Russo had felt true, paralyzing fear, not for his own life, but for hers. Mia wrapped her arms around his waist, burying her face in his neck. "I trusted you. I knew you would protect me." Dante pulled back slightly, looking down at her beautiful, resilient face. The realization hit him with absolute clarity. She was not too fragile for his world. She was the only woman strong enough to stand beside him in it. 3 months later. The dark, shadowed atmosphere of Russo Enterprises had completely changed. The air felt lighter, charged with a new, vibrant energy that radiated from the top floor. The Moretti family was gone, wiped from the city's underworld completely after their fatal mistake, and the Russo syndicate was more powerful and secure than ever before. But the biggest shift was inside the executive office. The heavy double doors were open. Inside, Dante Russo sat at his mahogany desk, but he wasn't looking at ledgers or security reports. His eyes were locked on the beautiful woman sitting in a matching leather chair across from him. Mia was no longer wearing her standard Navy assistant dresses. Today, she wore a striking, tailored crimson suit that commanded respect. On her left ring finger, a massive, flawless emerald-cut diamond caught the morning sunlight, sparkling brilliantly. She was no longer his executive assistant. She was his partner. In business, in life, and in the empire. The Milan merger is officially finalized, Don Russo, Mia said, a playful, seductive smile dancing on her lips as she closed her tablet. The contracts are signed, and our new shipping lanes are secure. Dante stood up from his desk. He walked around the heavy wood, his movements smooth and relaxed, the permanent scowl that used to define his face completely gone. He stopped in front of her chair, leaning against the edge of the desk, looking down at her with a look of pure, unadulterated adoration. "Excellent work, Donna Russo," Dante murmured, his voice a low, warm baritone. He reached down, taking her hand, his fingers tracing the edge of the diamond ring. "Though I believe your schedule for this afternoon needs an adjustment." Mia arched an eyebrow, her brown eyes twinkling with curiosity. "Oh, and why is that?" Dante leaned down, his lips brushing against hers in a soft, lingering kiss that spoke of absolute devotion and a future filled with fire and passion. "Because," Dante whispered against her lips, his dark eyes shining with a deep, unbreakable love, "the boss has lost his mind again, and he is taking his wife out on a date. And this time, nobody is going to interrupt us." Mia laughed, a beautiful, clear sound that filled the room, erasing the last of the shadows. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him down for another kiss, completely secure in the knowledge that she belonged exactly where she was, at the side of the man who had torn down the world just to keep her.